Welcome, guys. It's that time of the month again for another developer roundtable for the end of March, where we catch up with a different developer, usually each month, to discuss a different topic about Pantheon. For this month, the topic will be game tenants. So a nice, big, varied topic, nice and open-ended. The developers I have with me are Brad McQuaid and Ben Dean. Do you guys want to say good day and introduce yourselves? Can you guys hear me at all?
Can hear you.
Yep. Cool. I think I was muted for that first part. So, welcome to this month's Developer Roundtable. The topic this month is going to be game tenants. And the developers I have with me on board are Brad McQuaid and Ben Dean. Do you guys want to say a quick hello and introduce yourselves?
If Brad needs an introduction at this point, I'm not sure this is the right crowd.
I know.
That's like, hi, I'm Brad. Now, Brad McQuaid, good to see you guys, talk to you guys, good to be here. I'm the Chief Creative Officer, and I dabble with all sorts of things and drive the team crazy, and here's Ben.
Hey guys, you may know me as Ben Dean or Mikhail. I am the producer, in case you didn't know that. I'm also Director of Communications here at Visionary Realms.
Very nice, thank you guys. So what we're going to do, and that was just for the people in a week's time in the future, that when we open it up live to anybody on our YouTube channel, there'll be lots of hopefully new faces that'll pop in and get to see it as well. So I'm sure they still know Brad, but they may not know the Bens, so we just have to explain ourselves. But with that in mind, let's move on. I've got a bunch of great questions from you guys that I've collected from the forums and some private messages. So why don't we jump right in?
You muted. There you go.
You're like the last half a second of what you're saying is getting cut.
Let's just jump right in.
Oh, really? I'm trying to...
Yeah.
I've got multiple screens going with questions and everything, and if I hit my push to talk is the back button, so if I hit it, I'm going to lose my notes, and so I've got to quickly switch. So I'll try and let it linger for a second longer.
It's probably good practice for multiboxing.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. I'll switch screens. That makes it easier. Okay, so the first one. I'm not going to do names again like last time, guys. We'll just keep it anonymous. Not that there's a need to, but it's just easier to go through without having to put names to it. So the first one is, the tenet is an understanding that faction and alignment should be an integral part of interacting with the world and its citizens. The question is, does alignment imply the possibility of more factions impacting interactions rather than just simple factions? For example, player character race, religion, accolades, e.g. like a dragon slayer. Well, if you've slain a mighty dragon, would that impact your faction, and people, would they respect you for that and whatnot?
That's a cool idea.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a great idea, and similar to internal conversations we've had of where we want the faction system to go. So what I would expect at launch and what we can commit to is a traditional faction system, but evolving it and into that, making it more complex like that, different interrelationships, things like that, is definitely the direction we want to head.
We were actually on a call this week discussing a little bit of that, and how mobs can react based on faction or race or stuff like that. We haven't locked anything down, but it was definitely an interesting conversation that sort of lends itself into what we're talking about here.
Yeah, it kind of almost is a sister system to the dispositions. There's a lot of really neat things we could do there.
Yeah.
Nice, that sounds fun. Okay, so follow-up to that is a belief that an immersive world requires intelligent inhabitants. And the question is, we have read about dispositions affecting combat, but do you anticipate them affecting NPC interactions, even in town? So like, e.g. greedy equals a low trade offer, or snobbish may equal extra negative faction unless you're in a high status.
Is this like a village of dwarves? Maybe the 7 dwarves here. Greedy and snobby and sleepy.
I think I could see it head in that direction again, for sure. What I'm reminded of when I hear that is diplomacy and things like that, which is definitely something we want to look at post-launch. So if you hear kind of a recurring theme, it's there because we're trying to be transparent with you guys and upfront. And there's lots of great ideas you guys have major overlap, which is just awesome when we're thinking of a system or we're designing it and we go on the boards or talk to you guys and you're coming up with the same stuff, and it's a great validation. But I also want to be straight up with you guys and manage expectations such that, if this cool idea is not necessarily, planned for launch, it just depends on a lot of things. It may be a post-launch. So I hope you guys take that as a positive, not a negative. I'm not trying to like push your idea into the unknown, future, but I've talked about it before, posted about it before. We have the vision for the game, which is up to launch, and then we have the grand vision, which is really like a 10-year plan. And a lot of these great ideas will come later, but I think hopefully there's one consistent theme you'll see, and that is an aspect of the idea is launched, and then that aspect naturally evolves into an even cooler system, and on and on and on. So hopefully that makes sense, but that's kind of how we approach things.
That's a fantastic answer. I'm sure they will love that information. And it's such a deep topic too. Like, we can do so many things with the disposition and the AI and
and I just want to make sure people know this. It's managing expectations. We're not blowing you off. When we say we like an idea or we want to head in that direction, we really mean it. And we're thinking, both short and long term. And if you just, it's not, we're not just blowing you off saying, yeah, that might come one day. We'll let you know whether it's really part of the long term plan or if it's really not compatible with the vision and the grand vision. We'll let you know.
The other thing about the making a game in general, but I tend to see it quite a bit as a producer too. It kind of, the downside, the part of the job that I don't like is that there are so many
reporting to me.
Pardon me?
Reporting to me?
No, Brad, you're a pleasure. No, but there's so many ideas that come in because, well, obviously everybody on the team has a very creative mind, but all of these ideas come in, and then we start scoping it out, and we scope out each month at a time, and we realize that we cannot do everything. So sometimes it comes down to saying, all right, guys, we just have too much on our plate. So what are we going to cut? And that's always a kind of an unfun, not so fun conversation to have, because there's some things that you get really attached to. But the fact is, you can't do everything. And you don't want to do everything either. Because then it just gets, the game just starts getting muddy and murky. But
yeah, like we always said, one of the positives of being a smaller company is we're not beholden to all these other people in different places that are part of different companies, and we can say, you know what, that's something that's awesome. We don't have time to do it now. When we do it, we want to do it right. So we don't really cut things per se. We just move them to another bucket. Of either things we really want to do, kind of want to do, maybe want to do, and that's much more fun than just saying we're not going to do it or we'll never do it, because that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So got another question that's kind of changing topic a little bit, that talks about group finders. So will we have any form of group finder as we want to play with others? So being a social game, obviously needing to connect. It goes on to say about different options like LFG flag, LFG chat, LFG. Will there be any LFG mechanics that we might get? And yeah, what are our thoughts on that?
So, that really comes to the whole area of like onboarding and helping groups find each other and stay together. And the simple answer is yes with an exclamation point. If we're going to make a game that is group centric, there's still solo, there's still raid stuff, but it's primarily about groups. If we're going to do that, then it's our responsibility as developers to help you guys out and provide as much functionality and mechanics in there as we can. Yes, LFG is a kind of a given at this point. And then we've also talked a little bit about and in terms of finding people, and that is you're going to be able to put in different basically information about yourself. You can keep it to just when you play and what you like to play. You can go deeper than that. You can go outside of the game, talk about your hobbies and stuff like that. And basically, the system will find people. This is all voluntary, guys. If you want to just be you and shut that all off, you can. But if this is something you'd like to use, it will go out there and say, hey, so-and-so is someone you should talk to, and it'll actually kind of hopefully help build the social fabric of the game, as well as find people for you that you can chat to and you can group together with and just have a bunch of great shared experiences.
It's 2019, and there's so many lessons to be learned from the past 10 or 15 years with the onset of social networking. We have so many tools that have worked their way into our everyday lives that surely there's something that we can learn from there. I don't have specifics or more details on the type of systems that we have going in, but just keeping that in mind that we have so much information that we can draw on. Getting people together in 2019 is a lot easier than it was in 1999.
Yeah, it's absolutely, and to me, it's getting the groups together. There's two really big important tenets here that we have a responsibility to help the players out with. One is getting a group together, and two is keeping that group together. So there's also a lot of other systems that we're working on to, you're in the depths of a dungeon, and your enchanter has to leave for whatever reason. He's 15 and his mom is yelling at him to do his homework. I don't know. But, well, now what? We're one man down. We don't have another, maybe we don't have another CC guy. So there's going to be ways to, without making it, chimpy, there's going to be ways to bring newer people into your group, hopefully that you already know, but in trust. And so the idea is to get you guys up and running and continuing your adventure. The last thing we want is you guys, the group that go, man, we can't go any farther. Let's teleport back to the beginning of the dungeon or camp out here, and just having one person leave basically screw up the entire night. So that's really important to us, as is helping you guys find like-minded people, same time zones, interests, play styles, and help you make real friends. And then the last thing I would say is what we're not doing, because this always comes up whenever People talk about group finders. Group finding can mean a lot of different things. What it doesn't mean is teleport you to the beginning of an instance dungeon and bring in 5 other random people, and then running through a dungeon and then getting to the end and never talking to those people and probably never seeing them again. That's not what we're doing, and that would be the antithesis of how we're looking at the entire social grouping, guilds, all that stuff.
And it's not just grouping either. We're taking a look at the fundamental design and trying to provide, we talk about this a lot on streams and whatnot, but we're trying to provide the opportunity to get to know people. And you don't do that necessarily when you're clicking on a quick dungeon finder and blasting through a dungeon that takes 5 minutes to go through. You do that by creating experiences and opportunities. We were talking about, that comes down to everything, but we recently were talking about stuff that we could do for auctioning and then for player trading and stuff like that. And some of the systems that are in discussion, one of the main goals for it is to create those opportunities for people to actually talk to each other. And there's some really clever ideas in the works. I wish I could share them right now, but we still have to iron them out, or flesh them out, I should say. But we're keeping the core mentality of first and foremost, apart from its functionality, it has to provide an opportunity for players to have that one-on-one or one-on-many connection, because that's what really fuels the social aspect. These people that you meet either in auctioning or in trade skills or even on forums when you're trying to solve a quest together or trying to put a map together for a zone, these are the people that you're going to look for in game and make these lasting relationships with. Not so much the people that you go in and kill 150 mobs with in 5 minutes and never say a word to each other.
Well said. Well,
that's exactly right. Very well said.
It also kind of fits into any tenant you see, any of these systems that we tell you how important they are to us and hopefully to you guys as well. There's always a reason. It's like, okay, well, why is the majority of the content going to be around groups? Because we want shared experiences. Why are we trying to keep help groups form and help keep them together? Because then you've got that glue, that social glue, and you have people that become real friends, and they're encouraging you to log on that night or vice versa, and you have just that much deeper of an experience. So you can actually go to each and every tenant, and there's a logic, there's a goal, there's a scheme behind them all. They're not there by accident. They're not there just because we think, oh, that sounds fun. They really, really go down to the foundation of the game and how we want Pantheon to work. And it's also based on that foundation that we know works based on projects we've worked on in the past.
That's it. A lot of experience on the team. And which takes us to our next question, based on economies. So for this tenant, a belief that economies should be predicated on delaying and minimizing item value deflation. What are some of the strategies that VR is considering to make this work when you consider both loot as well as crafting as sources of usable items? So I think, how are we going to manage all of the value deflation in the market when you've got crafted items, looted items of different tiers, and how do we handle that?
Did we land on decisions for that yet, Brad? Do you recall?
Well, I don't think we're done. What we're talking about are item sinks and money sinks, and that's whenever you take an item or currency and you put it back into the game, and hopefully in exchange for something that's valuable, and that pulls either an item or a currency out of the economy, because so many items and currency are coming into the economy. Every time you kill something, you get some copper, whatever. Or every time you drop this boss mob and he has this, you got a cool sword. So there's always stuff coming in, and the game wouldn't be fun if there wasn't stuff coming in. But then we have to take care of the economy and make sure things are still worth something to the players. So there's, after a month, there's not 5,000, fiery Avengers floating around and they're worthless. We have to have sinks that bring those things out. So the question that what I heard was, what are some examples of item and money sinks that we're planning? And the general answer is as many as we can put in that work and make sense and don't interfere with the fun of the game. Some of the specifics is crafting's a great one, and we want to make adventuring and crafting interdependent. So the crafter or the adventurer may come back with an item that, which is a component that he can't really use himself, but he trades it or sells it to a craftsman of some sort. And they use that in crafting along with other components to make a product. And hopefully that product should also be rare and desirable because of the components put into it and the skill put into it. Decides what kind of value the product has, and then that therefore enters the player economy. So. Ben could probably think of some other ones, but there's a long list of both item sinks and money sinks. Potions would be something else, or different things that you can eat, edibles. Those are all consumables. That's all great. You're spending money or you're spending your own time accumulating these things, but then you're using them up. Not everything stays with you forever. So, anything else you wanted to add, Ben?
No, just apart from the we've mentioned it before too, but we do have an actually economist who's been working with us, and I know that Corey Lefevre has been working with him to draft up some ideas as well. Economy and MMOs is tough because it's always going to be very insulated, and working around that without it feeling artificial is always going to be a challenge. But like Brad said, there's so many things that we can do. It's never going to be exactly mirror a real world economy, but we can make it. At least I believe we can. We can certainly make it as manageable as possible with all of these things that we've got going on.
Yeah, it's actually fairly complex. We're gonna have reports and things where we can see what's coming in, what's coming out of the economy. That'll help us do our jobs and keep items valuable. But still, over time, we do actually want a little bit of inflation in there. So, the sword that you bought when for 25 plat in a year, it may or not be worth that, depending on what other similar items have been added to the game or things like that. And then the other reason to do the reporting is to find bugs, make sure we don't have any dupe bugs out there and anything like that. We've always got to be careful there.
So what are our thoughts on, I'm not sure if we've decided on zerging, but the next question goes on to, for those who feel that the allowance of zerging runs counter to many of the stated game tenets, how should they be managing their expectations with Pantheon?
Oh, that's...
I can answer that one if you want. So this one is not set in stone. There are a lot of systems too, and I've talked about this before and posted about this before, where we have these ideas in our head and they sound really good, but until we get a critical mass and later alpha, early beta, we don't have enough evidence or information to finalize things. We could finalize things now, but it would just be foolish. We've done this before. We know that you can't design something as complex as an MMO in a vacuum. And so, when it comes to zerging, I don't think there's any way to, we're not going to tell you can't zerg. There's no way to completely obliterate it, but we can do things like work certain behaviors into the disposition system such that if we, for example, created a boss mob for, let's say, the designers meant for it to have to be taken on by 16 players. Well, if 32 players run up and try to engage it, it could do any number of things. It could leave. It could call in reinforcements. All sorts of stuff that we can tie into its behavior and disposition. And that's just one example, but the NPCs will react if you just come in there with a ton more people than what they're designed for. So, I'm not saying that you won't be, certainly a common mob you'd be able to zerg, but any special mob, a lieutenant, a boss, what have you, that hopefully drops some, items that are cool, that are meaningful, and hopefully it's a meaningful encounter that requires tactics and strategy. Those guys are going to react to too many people, and that's basically how we're going to stop, or at least minimize the zerging problem. Otherwise, it just gets ridiculous. You just whatever you design the mob for, people bring that many more people, and then it just gets.
Exactly.
I think you're ruining the game at that point, or you're cheapening your experience. It may seem cool. We got them down really fast and it was easy, but really the experience it was cheaper. I don't know.
That's it. Going on back to like an understanding of factions and alignments that should be an integral part of interacting with the world and its citizens, will characters have an alignment tracker, such as true neutral or chaotic good, etc., based on moral decisions? And could there be moral decisions that result in irreversible consequences?
Yeah.
So, like with the faction, if you go to a faction tab for your character, I could imagine.
Yeah, no, I understand the question. Convo's in here. Maybe he can weigh into it too. But so the way that I understand it now is that we, at least with the whatchamacallit, oh gosh.
Factions or alignments? Or?
No, at one point, based off of the perception system, all of the storylines, we were going to have those kinds of options where you could make a decision and then that decision would permanently affect you. We've sort of gone away from that. I don't think we're going to go back to it at this point. And as far as I know, there's... to date, there's no chaotic neutral or stuff like that.
I can say the origin of factions, to my knowledge, was an EQ, and we had originally designed the game. This is all pre-release, and we had your basic D&D style alignment, from chaotic good to chaotic evil and neutral and everything, and we felt that was too. After a while, we started feeling that it was too one-dimensional.
Yeah,
and so that's when we came up with the faction system, and we're just going to take it. We're going to take it further with Pantheon and make it matter more, but. That design is still forthcoming, so we're probably not going to dig very deep today on the faction system.
Yeah, cool.
Well, just as a thought too, not that we're replicating real life, but it's very hard in the real world. Very few people think of themselves as evil, but a lot of people think of other people as evil. There are a few people who will say, "Yeah, I'm evil." So when you say that it's very one-dimensional, you're right. It doesn't account for all of the little details and perspective that we have, and that any world would have particularly in a world like Terminus, where there's so many races and such a weird history of coming together. There's got to be all sorts of tensions. Some of them are natural, some of them are old, some of them are new, and it's not so much based on evil versus good, but more about your perspective.
Yeah, that's it. So moving on to more of a PvE. Sorry, Brad, did you have something?
I was going to say what I'd like to see is a deeper faction system with more relationships between more factions. And in terms of alignment, because Ben's absolutely right. It's kind of from whose perspective, and most people don't think that they are evil. That you could, it's a basic summary. If you wanted to say, hey, how do I stand against this group over here? And it could tell you, well, they perceive you as a threat, and that you're evil. Something like that. Something that takes all those factions. There's tons of factions, tons of numbers. Something that would summarize you versus another group at that particular time. It may change later. They may change. You may change. So that's how I see it. Alignment would be a summary of you versus another group at that particular time. And we'll leave it at that.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so moving on to an assertion that player versus environment should involve more than NPCs, engage the world. Are we thinking more of providing props for role players or game mechanics beyond combat and crafting? And the example here, which I think is a good one to sum it up, is 20 years ago, bards would perform for crowds, at the Theatre of Tranquil in Freeport. Player run, devs just provide the stage, or are we shooting more for mechanics like, say, in Star Wars Galaxies, dancing, or Vanguard's diplomacy with that kind of system?
In a very recent conversation I had with Brad, it was kind of funny because I said, back in the day with EverQuest, do you remember the Furiona V server where there's, it was very roleplay specific, and Brad's of course like, yeah, I remember it. It was my idea. And I'm like, oh yeah, duh. But we had that talk about role playing and how cool it would be to add all this stuff. I will say this. Let me say that stuff is not in the design docs right now, but it is something that we're very, very keenly aware of.
Awesome. That's going to make a lot of people very happy.
Well, hopefully we can get
the other side of that really quick is in making the environment matter. I think that was part of the question.
Yes.
That's kind of a reference to the perception system and learning about the game from the environment as you walk along, getting a perception ping, or starting or joining a quest through perception. So that's what we mean. You've got to pay attention to the environment. You need to respect the environment. You need to be looking behind you or having someone watching your six. Situational awareness is key. Listening to the environment and could not only help you, but put you could find an item. It could put you on a quest. That's what we mean, as opposed to just the environment being a backdrop for NPCs. It's going to be a lot more than that. And so listening, embracing it, engaging it, respecting it, are all tenets of how we're approaching world building.
Nice. And as Neff put in chat, like even as a basic idea, just giving some kind of venues and emotes with interactable objects like chairs, players can do something with that and then take it upon themselves to be creative and have fun and immerse themselves even at a base level, which is something we can kind of look at. So we've got a couple more questions left. So moving on to a tenant A requirement that classes have identities. No single player should be able to do anything on their own. Similar to classes, will races have their own identities? For examples, will some races run faster or slower than others? Spellcast speeds, mana regen, etc., etc.
Sorry, I accidentally disconnected myself there and just came back halfway through the question. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Hitting the wrong button.
I was clicking stuff and I'm like, oops.
Sounds like my multitasking morning. So a requirement that classes have identities. No single player should be able to do everything on their own. Similar to classes, will races have their own identities? Example, run faster or slower, spellcast speeds, mana, swim, etc.
Yes.
Awesome. Beautiful answer.
Yeah, racial innate abilities, that really adds a lot of flavor. I mean, the vast majority of your abilities are going to come from your class, but what race you choose will matter for sure.
Yeah, the trick to that too, very conscious of, we don't want to set up a situation where the best warrior is an ogre. So if you want to be a warrior, you're always going to roll an ogre. We want to try and avoid stuff like that. So we've got a couple of ideas.
Yeah, well said. And that goes to classes too. You don't want there to be a class that someone wants to be. We always need one of these. We always want a warrior and not a paladin. And so we're very, very acutely aware of those balancing issues and such. And Ben's absolutely right.
All right, so on the exact same tenet, we've got about 20 minutes or so left too, guys, so we'll do these last 3 questions and then open it up for the last part. So a requirement, the same tenet about classes having identities. What are our thoughts on hybrid classes and how will they fit into the quaternity system, and which classes are considered hybrid or core?
That's really a Joppa question. Can we do justice to that, Bill? Or Ben?
Well, Bill.
I don't know what that came from. Ben.
That's the first time you've ever called me that. That's weird. Okay. I would say, it's not there. There isn't really a hybrid class from my perspective. Every class. Like, you have some classes that can tank and they have some heals, for example, but I wouldn't call it a hybrid class because it's not an exact split of some cleric spells and some warrior spells or abilities. It's each class is very much unique, and some have more support, some have more tankiness, some have more DPS, but they're not interchangeable in the way that a hybrid would be.
Yeah, I could say, that's absolutely true, and it's even deeper than that. But that's probably a Joppa question. But I know when we sat down to flesh all these classes out, that was one of the several things that we all agreed on right away. Is that we want to, like I said earlier, there's always a reason, or at least there should always be a reason why a system is in place, and we just have to avoid those scenarios where, well, we need a tank. Warriors are the best tanks, so all you paladins or whatever else, you're not invited to the group. That just can't happen. That can't be the way the game plays. So they're not really. I agree. Hybrid's not the right word, and the one thing I would say, and then Joppa can, the next time he comes in, can go into more detail, is if the class, let's say, is a tank, just for example, if we have a few tank classes, they roughly tank just as well, but they do it in a different way. They use different abilities, different tactics, different resources, so that you still feel like you're the class that you are, but you're not second best or third best at tanking. And that's kind of how we approach it. Give each class personality, give each class their own tactics and their own abilities that work in their own way, but make them also all desirable in your group. And
that's really well.
And that's really it's a great question, and it is something we're definitely aware of. And when we did our first full pass on abilities, I know that Chris Perkins was keeping that closely in mind.
Awesome, mate. Well said. Last two questions. There have been discussions in the PA Tester forums about mob AI versus a high fantasy world and suspension of disbelief. Based on the tenet, a belief that an immersive world requires intelligent inhabitants, I'm curious what the philosophy from VR development looks like as it tries to balance realism versus high fantasy as it relates to AI. A few examples would be the use of abilities such as taunt, feign death, fear, etc. So how do we kind of separate, what is high fantasy from realism to make it kind of fun but still challenging?
That's a deeply philosophical question.
It is very.
Yeah, I was hoping you would take that one, Ben. Proceed.
Well, I mean, there is a suspension of disbelief, and the actual genre that we call ourselves is fantasy realism. And what that means, at least in the art direction, but I think it sort of applies to the game as a whole. What that means is that we're gonna kind of meet you halfway. We're not going to be so fantastical that it's just completely out of this world, and it has no basis in reality. We are absolutely going to have some constraints of realism in there. But what you have to keep in mind with Terminus is that this is a planet where all sorts of shards from other planets and all sorts of other races from other planets and celestials are all kind of meeting in this tangled kind of explosion, more or less. So there are definitely some weird things that are going to be going on. But one of the conversations one of the things that does creep up fairly frequently is that we often think about what is the reason or what is the purpose. Is this there just because it's cool, or does this actually have a purpose? And all of the designers, I think, are thinking that way. They're thinking deeply about what would this look like, or what would this feel like, or what would happen in this situation. Does that translate down to the actual abilities? I think to a degree it does. There shouldn't be anything in there that just seems so massively out of place. Everything should make sense within the world of Terminus, which is, a place where all of these collisions and planes have collided. So it will be weird, but it should still make sense.
Yeah, realism.
That's a really long-winded
within our world,
answer, but
not Earth.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay. I think it's a great answer and really quick, and it could also relate to gameplay too. And that is, if something's realistic and it's fun, then that's great. If something's realistic but it's repetitive or just it gets boring over time, that's where we get into quality of life stuff. And for a perfect example, this is a simple example. When you get hungry and you have food in your inventory, do you have to right click and eat the food? That would be realistic, right? Go into your bag and grab an apple and eat it. But it's realistic, but it's tedious as well. So if you have that apple and you get hungry, it's just going to auto eat the apple, because we want food to matter, and we're going to have special kinds of food, magical, elixirs and things. But we want, there's things that should be automated that players shouldn't have to worry about all the time. So that's another aspect of the realism versus fantasy.
What you're describing there sort of reminds me of Heavy Rain. I'm not sure if you played it or not, but I have a couple friends who I enjoyed the game, but I have a couple of friends who didn't enjoy the game because they didn't get through to play it. Because what happens right at the beginning, spoiler alert, is that you get out of bed, you put some clothes on, you go, you brush your teeth, you have a shower. Like you're literally doing these actions, these mundane actions.
I quit already.
Yeah, and a lot of people do. So you don't want to get that granular with your game.
Exactly. There is hardcore survival games out there that focus purely on that for that kind of niche. But in a game like ours, you don't want to be forcing the players to eat, drink, and sleep exactly when they need to, or they will die. It'll
But even with the survival games, it's not like you might have to cook your food before you can eat it, but it doesn't dictate, okay, you have to cook your food and then you have to take it off the spit and then you have to lay down a plate and fork and then you have to, cut it with a knife and then you have to lift the fork up to your mouth. Get that granular.
All right, let's slip this last question in and then we'll go into some open kind of forum. So an agreement that player levels should be both meaningful and memorable. To me, this sounds like slower leveling progression, but what is VR's take on how they will manage levels both meaningfully and make them memorable? The second part of the question is kind of unanswerable, but how many game hours do they see it taking to reach max level if focused solely on gaining XP? That's kind of like how long is a piece of string. Yeah. It'll be different for everyone. But the first part, how are we going to make it meaningful and memorable for player levels?
We'll have a private party for every person once you level. We'll send out the party squad.
I like that. Free flights to Vegas and
yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna take care of all that, right, Ben? Pay for it.
Yeah, that's
my job.
Just put it down as Bill Dean. Send the check to Bill Dean. He'll sort
there you go. I think we can answer that generally in a way. So we want levels to matter. We want items to matter. You get a really cool sword. We don't want it to, in your level 20, we don't want it obsolete by level 21 and then cast aside. How much pride can you take in? You go through this really difficult and challenging quest to get this sword, and then one level later you have to just toss it aside or sell, trade, what have you. We don't want it that way. We're spreading out the abilities you get as you level up. You're not just getting them all at the same time. Same with the skills. They hopefully won't go up really all of them go up really fast once you level, and then your skills don't go up anymore. We want to avoid that. Abilities themselves, you learn from a trainer, and once you get into the mid part of the game, those trainers are not all sitting there at the entrance of the human city. They're spread out. They could be at the top of a tower or at the bottom of a dungeon. You've got to adventuring isn't just about getting loot. It's going to be about finding abilities as well, which also, by the way, interferes with power leveling too, because you've got to travel the world to get the abilities. If you don't have those abilities and you're really high level, you're just going to get crushed. But anyway, it's spreading things out, making things matter. Sure, if we go too far with that, and we're always watching for this, we're pretty vigilant. It can be boring. It can take you don't want a level to take too long. We don't want a hell level just for the sake of something taking a long time. But that also doesn't mean we have to swing to the other end and just dump things on you and allow you to zip through all the content, or worse yet, bypass the content.
I love that. That sounds awesome. And especially being down the bottom of a dungeon or something, it may seem like, a minor inconvenience, heck, I've got to go down and get it. But that's created an experience for you now on a journey. You're going to meet with people, either friends or new people, a new party. You're going to have to, travel down there, fight your way down, maybe take a boss out, get a new bit of loot you didn't realise, and then get in and have this new experience and memory from just going to buy your next upgrade. So I think that's really good. So, guys, that concludes our pre-questions. We've only got about 10 minutes left, but I'm going to open it up now. If you want to tag my name in Discord and with your question, and we'll try and get through as many as we can, short fire question answers in the next 10 minutes before we wrap it up. So we have got one here from 1ad7 that's got, could you elaborate on the inspiration for the game tenets? Are they viewed as the core principles that helped make a game like EverQuest great, or do some of them consider potential shortcomings that could be improved on for better gaming experience in Pantheon?
It might sound cliche, but I would say all of the above. It goes back to lessons learned playing text-based MUDs in the early 90s, all the way up through EverQuest Vanguard, and then all the other Star Wars Galaxies, EverQuest Online Adventures, other companies' games, from Ultima Online, Dayak, all the way up to the newer games. If you look at our team, we've been involved with a ton of them, and we've pretty much played them all. If you consider the entire team, and so it really is all of the above. It's keeping intact game mechanics that we've known now for decades really work, but it's also making sure we don't make mistakes that we've made in the past or that others have made in the past. And then thirdly, I guess it's ideas or refinements that we've had in our brains for years and years, and Pantheon is the beautiful opportunity to get that thinking actually into a playable game. That's one of the big ones for me personally. Moving the genre forward and trying out some of these really cool ideas, seeing how they resonate in beta, refining them after launch. That's one of the big reasons I love MMOs, and it's why I love MMO development, is because things can and should continue to evolve up to launch and beyond launch. And even though the genre is probably one of the hardest to make a great MMO, there's really no other genre that has that kind of a expansive, flexible attribute or setting to it that allows you to be so creatively expressive.
Yeah, well said, mate. Well said. So we've got another one from Neff. Post-launch, what's the philosophy on expansions and major sort of post-launch features that we sometimes talk about, with the idea to try and focus on expansion or really fleshing out one area or feature at a time?
Are these guys listening into our conversations? Because we listened to another one that we literally were talking about like this week.
I think
they've hacked into us. I think.
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit of both, to be honest. At least that's the way that we're looking right now. We're obviously focused on the launch game, so expansions are kind of really on the back burner. But that being said, as you see, we do have all of these cool things that we want to do, and I want to make sure that again, I want to state this, that this is not saying that this is the way that we're going to do things, but we were talking about potentially doing, kind of like modular releases where we just release, little bits of stuff at first, but also do major expansions as well. Like examples, like maybe we do a modular thing where you get another crafting skill that you can use, but then later on there's an expansion that comes with more zones or something.
Yeah, it really gets down to, do we want bigger expansions that are released less frequently, or smaller expansions that are released more frequently? And like Ben was saying, those smaller ones would probably be more focused, like let's move crafting forward to the next level. Whereas a larger expansion, people would expect, and rightfully so, like a new continent and some new playable races and classes and stuff. We're tossing around both. We don't think even that both are mutually exclusive either. But it's still very much a topic of conversation that we are continuing to have internally. And the cool thing is people keep coming up with more and different ideas on how to do this, and we don't have to make the decision today. And but you know what? When we do make the final decision, you guys will probably be some of the first to hear about it.
Good stuff. That's awesome. All right, so we've got 5 more minutes. We'll get a couple more quick questions in. So from Avoris, we've got, hopefully items last longer as they get more powerful, making achievements last. So essentially like a starter sword. Good for 2 levels, okay. Good for 2+ levels, then pretty bad. Are we thinking of doing something like this with items? Like if you a level 20 boss, would those items, gear or weapons last for a good 5 levels, or are we gonna, literally the next level would get replaced by the next boss and so on? How are we gonna handle that?
Well, I think I already touched on that, didn't I? That we want the items to last a while, and you to be able to take pride in them, and not work really hard to get a sword at 20 and just have it become obsolete at 21.
Yeah.
Is there more to the question than that?
No, so I think Neff and Avoris, I think we should put them on a special list and just put them in the corner.
Uh-oh. I didn't mean to get anybody in trouble.
And Everest, I'm just going to point out that wasn't a question; it was a statement. And
yeah, I know.
I put a question mark.
I tried to phrase it.
Well, he did put a question mark at the end, but that still doesn't make it a question.
I was going to say the question mark and go making achievements last question mark to try to make it sound better. All right, so last couple really quickly. What is the stance with the Bard? So this is about kiting. The Bard scooping up all of the mobs in a zone, running around and then AOing until they're dead. I was hoping for a game system disposition would address this. So how would we handle kiting for any class? Ranger, Bard, anything?
You know what? Joppa's online.
I was just going to say we've got Joppa and we've got he was here.
Kurt was here, wasn't he?
Well, Kurt's here, but Tim was Tom was here. That's the name I was looking for.
I'm gonna let's pump that question to those guys.
Yeah.
Punt.
Yeah,
he's typing.
Awesome.
He types slower than we speak, though.
Okay, so while Joppa and Convo are typing, I'll grab this last
deferring.
question. We've got like 2 more minutes left, guys. So with 4K gaming slowly becoming more adopted in the coming years as performance increases and prices drop, will the world be keeping up with the level of detail of the times, 4K textures and beyond, etc., or can we expect the world to age gracefully and eventually feel nostalgic a la EQ?
I don't think there's much choice. Has there been? I mean, you can say, one choice would be we don't care that technology's gotten better. The game's going to look the same forever. I don't think people want that. I don't want that.
No.
On the other side, though, 8 years from now, a zone's going to look better than a zone that was made today. That's just kind of the way things roll when you make a game that lasts forever.
It's an unfortunate reality. I mean, I'm not going to lie. The game will age,
or unfortunate,
but it should age gracefully. Like we have a very specific art style, and sometimes things like that become almost timeless. I recently played Beyond Good and Evil, which is, gosh, how old is that game? And I found it was fantastic. I loved all of the art in it, and it's super old. You can age gracefully, yeah.
Well, what helps the graceful aging is it's getting easier and easier to, because of just 3D engine technology, graphics cards, etc. It's getting easier, especially if you build things right. Like if you build your models very high resolution and then maybe you scale them down for the game. People can, developers can scale. There's a lot of technology within these engines that can scale, and you can, as technology gets better and when the time comes, you can kind of reskin or refresh So if that, as long as that wasn't a ton of work, I would be definitely in favor of it. I would only say no if it was like, well, we can spend the next 6 months on a new expansion, or we can spend the next 6 months refreshing the entire game. I'm always going to choose more content. But if there's a way the artists and programmers can scale things, apply new texture or shader technology to existing art, maybe run a batch file that goes through all of your art assets. If opportunities like that arise, why not?
Yeah, well said. All right, guys, that wraps it up. We're spot on the hour, maybe a minute past. But I just want to say thank you to Ben and Brad for joining me today. It's always a pleasure having you guys on. Thank you to everyone who turned up, and for all of those awesome questions. We really appreciate it.
And Kumu says, and Bill. Thanks, Bill, for showing.
And thanks, Bill, for that random guest appearance. But yeah, thank you very much, guys. We will do this again. We do it the last week, the last Friday of every month. So make sure you watch the forums. I'll release this in a week's time to the general public, but as soon as I'm done uploading this, I will put it up in the VIP channel for you guys to get first eyes on and have a week to have it all to yourself. Hit me up with any questions in that thread, and I'll try to do my best to answer if any more details or if I missed any. And other than that, have a great week, guys, and we'll see you.
Yeah, I just like to really quick personally thank everybody, all your patience, your support, your validation for what we're doing. It really fuels us on, and we really do. I posted it so many times. We have the best community I've ever seen for any game, MMO or otherwise, and having you guys there, as our backbone, as our support. It's making a better Pantheon, because it's giving us that additional boost of adrenaline, I guess, to go the extra mile. So you guys are a big part of that. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Well said, man. It means a lot to us and the entire team. So thank you very much, guys, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks, Al.